Hi. Several years ago, when I was single and dating, I was involved with a Christian man whose main concern seemed to be that any wife he chose would be obedient to him. He wasn't sure that I was that woman, even though at the time I was extremely into the submission of women, to the point that I quit a job and took a big pay cut at the next job because I was being asked to supervise a 20-year-old male student. And I believed what the Bible said, that a wife is to submit to her husband as she submits to Jesus. And obey her husband like a slave obeys his master, even to the point of enduring physical punishment. Now, I've never known a Christian woman who obeyed these commands, but that's beside the point. Anyway, at the time this man suggested his proposal, my 4 children ranged in age from about 14 to 22. This man came up with what he thought was a brilliant idea. He suggested that my children and I obey him for 2 months. Now, mind you, he and I weren't even engaged, let alone married. He figured that if we could obey him for 2 months, then he could be assured that we would do so in any marriage he and I might have. Well, naturally, I told the man that my children and I would be quite happy to obey him, under one condition, of course. We would obey him if he would provide for us. After all, the man, not the woman, was cursed to earn his living by the sweat of his face. I didn't see why I should suffer the curse of Eve on this man's behalf if he refused to suffer the curse of Adam on my behalf. Not that these curses should still exist, of course. Jesus supposedly abolished the death curse, and there is now neither male nor female. But most Christians ignore that. So they go around all the time cursed in Christ. As you can imagine, this man didn't take me up on my offer. He wanted obedience without doing anything at all for my kids and me. And we might be shocked by this, but is it not exactly what Jesus requires? The church isn't married to Jesus. Well, if you're a preterist, you think it is. But most Christians are not preterists. Fundamental Christians believe that the church is engaged to Jesus. Christians are betrothed to him. They're waiting for him to return so they can get married. We see this in the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 were prepared to marry the one groom, and 5 were unprepared and were locked out of the room when the groom married the other 5. This marriage was to happen when Jesus returned, which according to Matthew 25:13, nobody knows the day of. Matthew 22:1-14 states that those who aren't worthy to marry Jesus will be cast into outer darkness when the wedding finally takes place. This is the view of fundamental Christians. Also notice this from the book of Revelation. Revelation 19:7a, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come. This is in Revelation. Revelation 19:9b, blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. Fundamental Christians believe Jesus has entered them before marriage. He's taken control. He's their master, but he is not their husband. The marriage has not taken place. They are simply fornicating with Jesus. Sure, it's not actual sex, or is it? According to Francesca Stavrakopoulou, in her book God and Anatomy, Yahweh actually had sex with Eve to produce Cain. She says a literal translation of Genesis 4:1b is, I have procreated a man with Yahweh. Of course, the first part of the verse says Adam knew his wife. So I'm not sure whether that was added later or Stavrakopoulou is reaching. But then there is the highly sexual language in the Bible regarding Israel. Young's literal translation states, and this is Ezekiel 16:7-8, a myriad, as the shoot of the field I have made thee, and thou art multiplied, and art great, and comest in with an excellent adornment. Breasts have been formed, and thy hair hath grown, and thou naked and bare. And I pass over thee, and I see thee, and lo, thy time is a time of loves. And I spread my skirt over thee, and I cover thy nakedness, and I swear to thee, and come in to a covenant with thee, an affirmation of the Lord Jehovah, and thou dost become mine. Stavrakopoulou wrote, God's gaze is upon the girl's exposed sexual organs, moving him to cover her genitals, nakedness, with his own. His spreading cloak politely functioning here as an image of his mounting her. The sexual euphemisms continue, for it is by penetrating the girl's body that God enters into a binding covenant with her, an unequal power relationship in which the forging of the deity's exclusive and proprietary claim to Israel is presented as the sexual consummation of a man's possession of a bride. You became mine. And we can't forget the birth of Jesus. If he was fully human, as Christians claim, then he was created with both an egg and a sperm. Where did the sperm come from? How did it get inside Mary? If Yahweh simply formed a sperm by speaking or picking up some dirt and creating sperm, how is Jesus Yahweh's son any more than Adam was? Speaking of Adam, if his wife Eve did get her first child from Yahweh, so what? Mary got her first child from Yahweh. And we know that the sons of Elyon mated with humans. Genesis 6, 1-4 from the WEB says, "It happened when men began to multiply on the surface of the ground and daughters were born to them, that God's sons saw that men's daughters were beautiful. And they took for themselves wives of all that they chose. Yahweh said, my flesh will not strive with man forever, because he also is flesh. Yet will his days be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when God's sons came to men's daughters, they bore children to them. The same were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." Christians like to say this is talking about men who served Yahweh marrying women who didn't. But it's obviously not what it says. It's most definitely not the way any person reading should interpret it, unless the person has an agenda he has to support. The passage says the sons of Elohim, who were the sons of the gods and goddesses, mated with humans. Yahweh was one of those sons. He was the son of the Most High God Elyon. Yes, verse 3 says, Yahweh said his spirit wouldn't always strive with man, but that's not what it says. What it says is, Elyon said this. The actual word is Elyon, not Yahweh. Hebrew religious documents are like other religious documents. Gods had sex. They produced children. The language has been cleaned up for the most part, but it's easy to recognize that this was the situation. Now, I'm not saying these were actual gods or sons of gods. I'm saying this is what the Bible says. Obviously, I don't believe in the gods or the sexual escapades the Bible speaks of here, any more than I believe the escapades of the gods Zeus and Odin. But for whatever reason, in the stories, Yahweh was jealous of the gods with big penises and mighty ejaculations. And by the way, you can take that to mean whatever you want, but it surely doesn't sound like Yahweh thought these gods were merely figments of the people's imaginations. No, they were powerful gods in Yahweh's eyes, because, they were powerful in the eyes of the men who made them up, who made up all the gods, including Yahweh. This sexual analogy runs throughout the Bible. I'm not the one who came up with it. And it doesn't matter whether it's literal. The analogy is there. The language is erotic. Yahweh notices the breasts of a young girl and he wants her. And no matter how we view it, we have to look at what's happening with regard to Jesus. He wants everybody in the world to give themselves to him while in the engagement period. That way he can see whether we'll be obedient. Most of us won't, of course, even within the engaged group. But those who are obedient enough, Jesus will eventually marry. Just as Yahweh groomed Israel from childhood when he found her in her blood, Jesus is grooming people. He takes them when they're very young. Some might be 5 or 6 years old, some 12 and some a little older. He seduces them with sweet words, promising them a mansion somewhere in the great beyond. His little carpenter self is up there in heaven just working away on all those mansions he has to make for all his little male and female brides. Jesus is polyamorous and bisexual, just like his father. Israel was Yahweh's wife, daughter, and son, and Yahweh was also married to Israel's sister Samaria. Jesus is married to every Christian and pretends that they're one bride, just as the Bible pretends 3 gods are one. While Jesus expects full service and worship from his fiancée, he does nothing for his betrothed ones and nothing for those who are preterists and think they're already married to him. They're still sick, they're poor, they're weary, they're hungry and thirsty, they weep, and they hope against hope that they will be special enough to capture the attention of Jesus so he'll consider them worthy enough to be a part of his harem someday. And bless their hearts, with no evidence whatsoever, these people bow down to him and brag on him and talk about how wonderful he is and how amazing it is to have him inside them, when he's not even their husband and has done absolutely nothing for them that others don't also have happened to them. Christians suffer just like the rest of us do. Jesus is an absent fiancé, off blissfully living his life while people who never saw him and really know nothing about him spend their lives trying to please him as their Lord and Master. They give him their body, their love, their finances, their marriage, their children, their vocation, their hopes, their dreams, their very thoughts, while receiving absolutely nothing in return. Oh, they claim he fills them with joy and ecstasy. But that's all in their heads. It's a fantasy. Even if this myth were true, we deserve to live our lives as we choose. We should not be shackled to a man who refuses to marry us until we spend our entire lives proving ourselves worthy of him. And we certainly shouldn't do it for nothing, which is what Christians have. They're like a dog chained in the backyard whose master refuses to feed him and doesn't release him so he can go find someone else to feed him. In fact, it's even worse than that. Not only does this horrible man expect obedience and everything we have while doing nothing for us, but he also requires that we dogs, chained in the backyard, suffer beatings for him and with joy. Matthew 5:11-12 says, "Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you, falsely for my sake. Rejoice, and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you." Jesus expects us to be subjected to mockery and persecution for him. He says anybody who is engaged to him will suffer persecution. He throws everything he can at his betrothed because, he has to make sure we'll hold up under any circumstances. Jesus wants us to take beatings for him. He wants us to allow ourselves to go to prison or be killed for him if that's what it comes to. Oh, I know. He claims that if we follow him, no evil will befall us. Not even a weapon of mass destruction can harm us if we're obedient to him. And then he contradicts it later. And the funny thing is, it's the husband who is to be the protector in the family, right? Is the wife supposed to get up and risk her life in the middle of the night when the family hears a noise in the house? Trust me, whoever gets up may wind up dead, and Jesus will be nowhere to be found. Jesus is an abusive lover. He's using your body for his own pleasure and ego trip while you're wasting away. As I've said before, you're like poor Delta Dawn. You're waiting for that mysterious dark-haired man to come and take you to his mansion in the sky. He ain't coming. Run while you can. Give back that ring. Take back your life. Remember that man who asked that my kids and I obey? Jesus was his role model. So he was just following Jesus' example. It took me a while, but I got out of the relationship with the man, and also the minor did to Jesus. And you can break your engagement to Jesus as well. You can be free. I'd like to help you. In your struggle to be free, there must be 50 ways to leave your lover. Thank you for watching, and thanks to my patrons. Bye.